Hello there fellow acolytes of Sega Saturn, welcome to another Sega Saturn related video. I know it's been a while since my last video, but what's been going on lately and I've not really had the opportunity to do so. In fact, I'm only really doing this as a one-off special to release on my birthday. Anyway, I've had various requests from people asking about recommendations on Sega Saturn titles where they've only got like a limited budget to work with. So in this video I'm going to attempt to address that, but in video form. The budget I'm going to work with, as you probably gathered by the title, is €100. This is on the presumption you already own a Saturn, action replay card, and all the necessities for Sega Saturn enthusiasts. And also bear in mind that this €100 is only more or less. It's based on the recent average sold prices for the summer of 2019, and of course in the future these prices may well be higher. That being said, if you buy from things like Facebook groups or use like overseas shops like Japantiquity, then you may even get some of these titles for even cheaper than what I mentioned in the video. Anyway, I've tried to make my list as varied as possible to ensure there's many different games for all tastes. I have omitted RPGs and Shmups though. I don't really care for these genres, as you probably may know from past videos, and the ones I do like are pretty pricey. So if you want to swap out some of the titles in my list and replace with something like Gary Skyden or Dark Savior, then whatever, feel free to do so. Anyway, let's get to it.
First up on my list is Panzer Dragoon, which is one of the most iconic game series, if not the most, on the Saturn. It's a rail shooter, but you have the ability to look and shoot to the sides too. It's a gorgeous game, plays like a dream. I mean, personally I prefer the first game in the series, which sets you back around €12 for a Japanese copy, but I know a lot of people prefer the second because you can evolve your dragon, it has multiple paths and things like that. I like the variety of levels in the first game more, but honestly both are great games and the price for the second is about the same, so choose whichever you think you'd prefer. One genre Sega was the king of in the 16-bit days was the beat 'em up. Unfortunately, the Saturn didn't see the likes of Streets of Rage or even a proper Golden Axe game. However, the console still has a handful of decent titles in the genre, my favourite of which is Die Hard Arcade. Die Hard Arcade, however, is pretty pricey. However, it's a good thing that the Japanese version is pretty cheap. So Dynamite Decker is the name of the Japanese version and it's about €9. It's effectively the same game, but it doesn't have the Die Hard branding. It's very accessible to English speakers too. The QTEs are in Japanese and they require a little bit of guesswork, but honestly, if you fail them, usually it doesn't matter. The game's a fantastic beat 'em up and one definitely worth owning. Whilst racing games aren't exactly my forte, the Saturn was blessed with quite a few great racers, most of which as well are pretty damn cheap. My favourite's Gale Racer, but I know that's not everyone's cup of tea. As such, instead I've opted for Sega's famous arcade title, Sega Rally. You can get the Japanese version for about €8, which, is a bargain. There aren't many cars or courses, but the game's so well made that what is there is a lot of fun. So much so that many consider it to be their favourite game on the system. Going from one common favourite to another, we've got Knights into Dreams. Like with Panzer Dragoon, Knights is one of those games that kind of define the system. It's sort of an arcade-like 2D platformer, but instead of walking around, you fly around the course. It's a very unique game for the system, and you won't find anything similar elsewhere. It takes a little getting used to, sure, but when you do, you'll be hooked. Japanese copy should set you back around a 10. When it comes to 3D games, one of the major titles for the Saturn was Resident Evil. It's a fantastic version of the game with Saturn exclusive extras. Problem is that a PAL copy sets you back around €25, and the Japanese version isn't very import friendly. Thankfully, Sega's own take on the survival horror genre, Deep Fear, is very import friendly and a lot cheaper, at least when you import it. For €10 you can pick up a Japanese copy and have a whale of a time. All the dialogue and menus are in English, with only bits and pieces in Japanese. For example, like the names of the items. However, those can be easily identified by using the pictures. It's a fantastic title in its own right, and I would say it's arguably better than the original Resident Evil game. The fact that it's also a Saturn exclusive to this day means that it really should be in every collection. One game that I've never hidden my liking of is Secundo Arakotoa Sandoaru. It's a Japanese puzzle game, I suppose, that can be picked up for around €7. I say it's a puzzle game, it's actually more like a series of mini-games or micro-games within like an arcade story mode. In the story, you make your way through a series of levels fighting enemies. However, each fight is basically the result of a successfully completed minigame that's randomly chosen. You can play either solo or with a friend, and you can also choose the minigames individually if you want to practice. For the style of the game, think something like WarioWare, but made like years before. It's one of those hidden gems that's, just a joy to play. If you're into more traditional puzzle games, then you can't go wrong with Puyo Puyo Sun. This can be picked up for like a couple of euros, and is probably the best Puyo Puyo game Sega's ever made. It's addictive, both in solo and multiplayer, and it's a great fix for puzzle aficionados. It's an easy recommendation, especially given the price. Puzzling's not your thing, and you're more into like the shooty bang bang stuff, rather than, things you have to think about, then I've got you covered. The best first-person shooter titles were generally made by Lobotomy Software. They had great ports of Quake and Duke Nukem, which, go for the same price, pretty much. They're about €20 more or less to pick up, and they're great games. However, if you want something more than just a port, then their original IP Exhumed is definitely worth picking up. It's about €22 for the PAL version, and it's the most expensive game on this list, but honestly it's also one of the best. It's set in Egypt, and Exhumed has you shooting, like Egyptian type creatures, but it requires you to do various platforming and item collecting too. In fact, in terms of progression, it's sort of like an early Metroid Prime than a Doom game. It's a great shooting title that, you should pick up. If you prefer your shooters with a physical gun, then picking up a Japanese copy of Virtual Cop 2 and a light gun is actually possible for around €11. Virtual Cop 2 is a fantastic game both in the arcade and on the Saturn for a reason. You'll need a CRT television to use that light gun, sure, but if you don't have one, I'd still recommend grabbing the game and playing with a controller. Hell, you could even use the extra cash to grab a beer or two to quench your thirst while you take down some wrong-uns. One of the games that many people mistake for a PS1 exclusive is the original Tomb Raider. It actually originated on the Saturn and was never intended to go to other consoles. You can pick up a PAL copy for pretty cheap too, but personally, I'd advise against it. I'm not a massive fan of the original game, since the second half of it kind of degenerates into obnoxious level design and sparse safe placements, and it does tend to get a little bit infuriating later on. As such, I'd personally recommend grabbing Lupin III, Sage of Pyramid, for about €4. It's a Japanese exclusive title, sure, but it's extremely import friendly. It plays effectively like a budget version of Tomb Raider, but personally I find it a much more enjoyable experience because it's a lot more consistent in terms with, the actual difficulty as well, and all the different stages are very short, so you can kind of just do bits and bats. It might not look great, sure, but the game has a real charm to it. For my final game, I feel it's appropriate to pick a genre that was pretty predominant on the Saturn, which was fighting games. Many would recommend the likes of Virtua Fighter 2, but instead I'd recommend Fighters Megamix. You can pick up a Japanese copy for about $5, and to be honest it's a much more enjoyable experience. Mechanically it's a very solid 3D fighting game, but it contains a ton of unlockables and a huge variety of characters. You can play as a generic Virtua Fighter dude if you want, but if you find that a little bit too boring, you can play as like a big bear, or a cactus, or hell even the Daytona car. It's more or less an exclusive to the Saturn too, so it makes a great addition to the collection.
So, that's a whopping 11 games you can get for your €100, all of which are fantastic titles too, and many of them are actually exclusive to the Saturn. Thanks all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.